And good evening and welcome to City Focus. And I'm Marty Olsen, your host, and it's good to be back. I've been off the air for about 7 weeks. As you know, my great guest coming back to open up our new studio over here in Groton as well, had pneumonia over the holidays, which kind of knocked me back a little bit because you had been scheduled to come on the program over in Waterford in December, and we had to cancel that.
Well, I'm glad that, for one thing, you've recovered so nicely from pneumonia, and number two, that put me in this new beautiful studio, which is fantastic looking. Really, it's excellent.
I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking. Drew and Frank do a good job, and they'll make us look good.
Good. I need help.
Well, folks, I'm tickled to have Bill George back. I had him on as a guest in his capacity as an author. He wrote a book, which I've got a copy here. It's actually, we've got the banner back behind me here, but Home Fields, and it's Coast Guard Academy football coach, of which you had a good part of your professional career at the Coast Guard, and recounting unfulfilled lives of World War II. And what a great book, what a great interview, and also came and spoke to my Kiwanis Club, which I appreciated. And folks, if you have an opportunity, this is a book you ought to get, and I'll let you speak to it because it's about your family, and
I took
terrific.
I took one football game. It was 214 at that time. My wife and I adopted very late in life. We had no other children. We adopted a newborn baby in 2010, and now it's 214, and my dad had moved in with us and was under hospice care. So it's a little bit about family caregiving and how we took care of him, the relationship of my now 4-year-old daughter with him, and then how I go through to win this rivalry game at Merchant Marine. And of course, I weaved in every night he would reflect on people he grew up with that went off to World War II. And it circles around 4 people in his tiny little upstate town of Myers, New York, this little Syrian immigrant village where they all came, and then now they're going back overseas. And these 2 best friends that were a couple years older than him went off to war. One, who's at the same time he went off to war, his girlfriend had leukemia in the 1940s. So it's kind of a tragic tale. I weave it back and forth. We kind of go back each night and reflect on these people's lives as they grew up and had unfulfilled lives. They led tragically short lives, and he is reflecting on it as he is passing away himself. And of course, my daughter and him bonded almost as brother and sister.
Well, the relationship that they shared, I thought, was famous. It was terrific.
When you're 4 years old, when you're born, and he moved in with us when she was 6 months old, and he was a healthy, wonderful man, and then he went downhill. But and we couldn't move him out. But I think she just thought of him almost as like a brother. I think when you're 3 or 4 and you're growing up with a grandfather who's, kind of like a playmate to you, and he really didn't lose his senses that bad as much as he lost his physical stuff. So he was very aware, and I just think she thought of him as almost like a brother in a sense, more than anything else. And of course it hit her harder, but we knew that. It's part of life. And a lot of families go through this. You'd be surprised. More families are condensed like this than you think. More families are caregivers on one level or another. And if you're a caregiver, it involves also young people, old people, So I think it's probably more common than it appears to be.
Yeah. But how you were able to weave the growing up your father and growing up in upstate New York, and how life was different. It's not like it is today.
Very different. In fact, one of the characters that is still alive at 101, who had a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star from World War II. He is in the book. He's not one of the 2 main, but he's one of the people from that village that went to war. Said he went to war and never even watched TV. Never even left this little village. Never was in a car. And all of a sudden he's on a boat going overseas to North Africa. So that's how it affected people then. And of course, they came overseas thinking, okay, here we are, and now they got to send their children back over, 20 years later to fight a war. Yeah. So
And your family came from kind of in an immigrant community. I mean, it was.
There was a little immigrant community. My father's side of the family was a little immigrant community called Myers, New York. They had immigrated from Syria. They had salt mines and salt plants there on Cayuga Lake. They would, I think they sent the water down into the mines and would bring up the salt from underneath the lake, and that's where they all worked. They were all sent there and got jobs and had beautiful homes that overlooked the factory. And once the factory got torn down years later, they had homes that overlooked the lake. So that's how they lived.
So I mean, I found that interesting and fascinating, and also being local, because you were using real people. That there were people primarily around the Coast Guard Academy. I mean, I know these folks. I mean, I know Bob Bono, for instance.
Yeah.
And, my cousin Rube was a superintendent. He didn't have him in the book, but he was a superintendent at the academy.
Yeah, he was superintendent when I was there. Yeah. Well, I tried to contrast. Maybe in a way I was saying, as I was so self-centered on winning this one rivalry football game, I have an old man who's talking about these lives that didn't go on. So maybe in some ways I was trying to show that, even though we have to all do our jobs and we have everything, these young people didn't have the opportunities or the fun that I was having in a football situation. So I was trying to bounce back with, and again, I tried to talk about people in the Coast Guard. I didn't just try to talk about this game. I reflected on, two people who died in the Coast Guard at a very young age. One of my players and one of my players' brothers. Both died very young in the Coast Guard. And both of those deaths touched me a great deal.
And also, you mentioned in our initial interview the assistance you received from Vicki Fulkerson, who is the editor now for the sports page on Today. And since that time, I've had her on the program. She was a terrific guest, I might add.
Yeah, Vicki's a dear friend of mine. She spent many hours helping me with this book. Really was very good in research. She came to me one time, and my grandmother is in part of this book, and she said, I found your grandmother's name spelled 5 times. My grandmother died in 1965. I don't know how I didn't even know she had her name in the paper. But she said, I found it 5 different ways to research. That's the kind of research that Vicki did. She was tireless in her research, and she double-checked all my facts. And we had to. She did an excellent job of helping me with the editing of the book.
And I believe that she, along with Admiral Stowes, was able to help assist in getting this baby published.
Yeah,
well.
Admiral Stowes. I was writing to agents, and no one would even read it. And then Admiral Stowes, I ran into her homecoming, and I said, I know you've published a book, had a book published, and I just wanted to, I was going to sell. She said, well, let me take a look at it. And then after that, she said, I'm going to hook you up with a couple of real small publishers. And she did, and one of them said, we'll take it. But the thing, when you go with a really small publishing company, you end up doing all the marketing yourself, which is technology and all that nowadays.
We're doing our best here, folks.
And I appreciate
in our
it.
little small way, but I'll tell you, it's so if folks wanted to purchase this, where would they have to go?
You can go to Amazon. You can, if you go to a bookstore, they'll order for you. You can go to Barnes and Noble. You can go. It's not a self-published book on Amazon. It was published, the old-fashioned way. So you can get it on Amazon. You can go to Barnes and Noble. I don't think it's on the front shelf when you walk in, but if it's not there, they can order it for you, and you can get it anywhere. Any bookstore will get it for you. Or, I had it when I went over and did a signing at the Mystic bookstore, which I was fortunate. That was before they moved out of Mystic, the old historic book. I went in, my daughter said, there's 3 copies on the shelf right there. So I said, well, hide those, we'll sell these other ones. So you can get it anywhere. And I've given quite a bit of the money to Lauren's First and Goal for pediatric cancer. What I didn't realize is that Lauren's First and Goal for pediatric cancer gives it to like Dana-Farber and Johns Hopkins and Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. So we were guests. In fact, I took Vicki, my wife, and Lila along. We were guests at Fenway Park from the Dana-Farber thing. And I said, well, I didn't give any money to Dana-Farber. I gave it to Lauren's First and Goal for pediatric cancer. They said, well, Lauren's First and Goal gave it to us and said, so we ended up having a wonderful, they got to meet Carlton Fisk, who was much taller than I thought.
He's a big man.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. So. I'll let you cut in. I'm babbling on
no,
here.
well, listen, I think that's terrific. I mean, and what a beautiful story. I mean, this is why I like having you on here. You've got yarns to share. He could be my co-host, folks. I think that would make for. I don't know if he's got the time for it, but he's got the personality for it.
Well, if it got me out of the house every night, I think my wife would love it.
But again, I'm just I'm hoping that you're doing well with this. I mean, and I'm sure that within the Coast Guard and the Academy and your former players and stuff that you must have done reasonably well. And I maybe up in the area where your family grew up.
Well, not so much. Well, yeah, not where I grew up, but in the Ithaca area, it did. The Tompkins Weekly. If I pull it up, but they did a wonderful feature on it because one of the people is 101, Gus Isaacs, who's still alive. And at first they were like, well, we get a lot of people with books, and then all of a sudden they realize they've got a guy down the street, like within a mile from where they're publishing their newspaper, that's got a Bronze Star and Purple Heart and is, still going to church every Sunday. So then that took off, and that hit the Ithaca community very big. And my alma mater, had a person from the Dartmouth Review come and interview me, and they did a wonderful job too. And so yes, you do the best you can. And nowadays there's so much technology, and what I have to do is an audio book, which I haven't done, and I have to get on that because so many people tell me they only listen to books now. They don't read them as much. They listen to them. So
yeah, when they're driving.
Yeah.
So Spielberg got the movie rights?
Oh, don't I wish? Don't I wish? Don't I wish? Don't I wish?
Well, one of the things that you had mentioned to me is that when I initially had met you, is that you were contemplating doing another book. And since then, I've got the distinct impression maybe you've actually put pen to paper or
I have another book.
Fingers to keyboard.
I have another book done. Yeah, it's done. It's fiction. It's not about the Coast Guard. It's not about football. It's a novel. And it's done. I'm redoing. I'm a little concerned about the first chapter. Admiral Stowe's read it. Vicki read it. Marianne Luce, who does the charity for Lawrence First and Goal, read it. So I'm in the process now of just finishing, just going back through it one more time. I'm going to send out some things and see where we go from here. Yes, I have it completed, but I haven't sent it anywhere or proposed it or done anything with it yet.
So the fact that it's a novel, but you're not comfortable.
Well, as soon as
touching on what it's
about. To be honest with you, I met with at one of my daughter's soccer teammates' fathers is at the Naval War College, and he started going over this AI stuff with me, and he started testing me, and I'd give him topics for a book, and he'd hit a button and 20,000 words would come up, and I'm like, so it's not. I'm not trying to be overprotective. I just want to send it out to some people first, and see where we go from there, and then once I get it out there, then I'll be glad to talk about it. So I'm not trying to keep it a secret. I haven't sent it to anyone yet.
Yeah, but okay. We'll have you back here on City Focus.
Can't wait. I can't wait.
Well, I can't wait either. One thing I'd like to chat about is your coaching tenure at the academy. And the challenges of running a football program in a military environment, in a small school, and where are you getting your players, and being competitive in the also the restrictions that are placed upon the students being at the academy with the academics and the military aspect. I mean, it's not like you're going to Conn College across the street.
Well, it is. There are, like you said, and there's a lot of academics that are headaches. I mean, they're challenged from day one to day end, and I've always said there's three major headaches at this academy: academics, academics, and academics. There's no let up, and you have to follow the rules, and you have people that are a long way from home, so you have to make football fun, and at the same time, you have to, show it as a purpose that the sport itself is helping make you a better officer. You know, you're in charge of people. I mean, so you want them to develop leadership through that sport. And so I've often thought that, you know, the coaches I had over the years, Ray Lafort, Dana Fleischman, C.C. Grant, Jay Driscoll, Pat Knowles, I could name 100, but those 5 were there the whole time. We were always trying to show people and give people leeway to become leaders on the field, in the locker room, in the meeting rooms. And so you use that and then guys buy into that. If you're showing them that this is really part of your military training and we're trying to do some good things, then they'll buy into it. Now, in terms of, you can't change the academy to say, okay, the tail is now going to wag the dog and football is going to run the show. It doesn't work that way at Coast Guard. So in many cases, you have to adapt. Okay, we went to no huddle when it first came out. We were one of the first teams that went to the spread no huddle. Probably one of the first in the country. So we adapted to that. That helped us a little bit, you know, using lighter guys running all around, not letting the other team have rest. So you think of things you have to do. In terms of recruiting, you don't get to pick your players, but you do get to recruit. You want to find players that have an interest in the military so that you can expose them to the place, that have the academic grades, and then you have to get them in the application process and show them the good things of the Coast Guard. Then you hope that they can get accepted. You know, you don't want to mislead kids, so you're only, you know, picking those kids that are at the top, but you can't pick
Coast
the
Guard
players.
does not require an appointment, so I mean, you can go through the admissions office.
Goes
correct?
through admissions. Coast Guard does not require
Like West Point,
West
Air
Point,
Force and Naval Academy.
a government appointment. It doesn't require that. But you still don't get to pick your players. You don't have football slots there. You don't get to pick your players and say, we really need a quarterback. Give me that kid right there. You just got to do the best you can and go with it. And that's what, you know, a long time ago, I can't remember, someone told me when I was at West Point Prep years ago, remember something, when I first got there, and this was 1987, it's the military's academy. Don't ever let that leave your mind. You know, it's not a private college where you run the football program and, you know, it's the military's academy. And they have a goal. They have to protect our nation. Yeah. So that's the focus.
But some pretty dynamic coaches have come out of the military academies, and you know, 2 highly prominent basketball coaches, you know, Bobby Knight and Krzyzewski down at Duke.
Yeah. And I think it's a good training ground as those, you know, well, Krzyzewski was a graduate of the academy. And so he's probably as symbolic a graduate in terms of coaching that you could probably think of. I know Lombardi coached at West Point, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'm trying to think.
Before he went to the Giants.
Yes, yeah. And Bobby Knight, I think, was an Ohio State grad, if I'm not mistaken. But
he played with Jerry Lucas and Johnny Havlicek.
Yeah. So it does. It is. And let me also say that I had the greatest job in the world for, you know, 21 seasons. I mean, you could say the challenges are there, but the good far outweigh the challenges. And it was, nobody in this country, whether they're a coach or not, had a job like mine. And now Coach C.C. Grant has it, and he just beat Merchant Marine in the final game down there, and he's now got the greatest job and has had it for 5 years and is doing a super job. So.
That's terrific. Yeah, I saw. I think it was the week before. I saw you at the game at the academy, and they were playing SUNY, I believe.
Yeah, SUNY Maritime. Yeah, it's a tough league. It's a tough football league. It's a tough basketball league. The Coast Guard Academy in men's and women's sports are in some very tough competition. And I was saying that to my daughter today. I was driving. I said, you don't realize that this level of competition that the academy is in. You know, in the teams they play, that's a high level of Division III football and Division III men's and women's basketball, soccer, men's and women's soccer. It's a high level of, you know.
Well, the women's basketball squad this year has been off to a phenomenal start.
Yeah, they're outstanding. They look outstanding, and we go to quite a few of the games. My daughter loves to go, and they're good. They're very good.
And the men's team is hovering around 500.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'll be able to maintain that through the conference schedule, which they're kicking into now. But
it's the toughest basketball league in the country, That's what they're in. You don't realize it. I mean, they're in a very, very tough basketball league. So, but Kevin does a super job, as does Alex with the women. So they both do super jobs, and they're both tremendous coaches, and they're both having good years so far.
Yeah, and they're both locals. I mean, she's from, I believe, NFA, correct? The North Free Academy. Did she go
I'm
to
not
high
sure.
school?
I know she went to my alma mater, Ithaca College. That I know, but I'm
Okay.
not sure where she grew up. I think she.
And Jazz,
He's a St. Bernard's grad.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think he played with Glenn Miller, who is coaching now up at St. Joseph's in West Hartford basketball.
I'm not 100% sure on that, but I'll take your word.
Well, Miller was a Fitch guy. He played for Calhoun at Northeastern.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That was a while ago then, right?
Yeah. Before he made his entrance at UConn.
Yeah.
Have you taken any interest in this new college football championship format?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I know that Drew, before we set up here, was asking me about the NFL, and I kind of root for the Vikings because I know one of the coaches, but I don't really. I enjoyed the college watching that more than I do. Yes, I enjoy it. I enjoy the playoff part of the college very much.
Like this current format, or you think it needs to be tweaked? More teams, less teams?
Well, from my point of view, I don't know why they have.
They get seeded.
I don't know why they have a bye. I don't know why they don't just put 16 teams in and just let them each play. And that to me would be. But again, I'm a fan now, not a coach. So I'm a fan of it. I like it. I enjoy watching it. I would like to see more teams in. I don't think the seeding was all that great, but who am I? I'm just another guy watching the game.
Well, D3's got a tournament. How many teams play in that tournament?
I think there used to be 32, but I think there was 36. When I played, it was 8. They took the top 8 teams in the country. They just ranked them. They had a ranking, and that's how they did it. Then as they got to have leagues, they made more and more automatic bids. That changed around somewhere in the late 1990s, maybe around 2000, 2001. Then all of a sudden they had all these automatic bids, so it's hard to earn the at-large. So it's a bigger tournament. Division I is so much all about money. You never really know, you know what I mean, what they're thinking. So I don't,
Well, I still call it Division One AA. It's got a different name for it now. I mean, but the Ivy League and the Patriot League level, and they play highly competitive football. I mean, I enjoy watching those guys. And there's in D2, so I mean, you've got different levels of competition, and they all have championships.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me is the number of guys now with this transfer portal who were once at a 1AA school and are now at a Division I school. I mean, in fact, there's a young lady from Princeton that's playing at UConn in women's basketball right now.
Chen, I think her name is.
Yeah. So
she was a guard.
Yeah, and so there's an example right there of people in the 1A that suddenly are in 1AA up to 1A.
And she's playing. She's not warming the bench.
Yeah. My daughter tells me every day. She tells me what they all do.
Well, that's good. Well, your daughter's big into basketball.
She enjoys it. She's on the St. Bernard's team. They have a small team of 10 kids. They're very competitive. They play hard and tough. They had a heartbreaker last night, but they're about 500 or so, and they're well coached, and they play well, and they play hard, and they hustle. And
now, is she playing varsity, or is she?
Yeah, it's just her second year basketball. They don't have enough girls for the JV team, so she's on that one squad, and she goes to practice, and she enjoys it. She's gotten in a couple games, and she's learning. She's learning, working hard, and you take your lumps when you're young, and you get better.
Yeah. Now, does St. Bernard's have their own squad, or is it one of these consolidated teams where they're playing with
that's
another?
their own squad. I think the only thing they do that for is football. I think.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, they have their
that's
own.
become more widespread. Years ago, that didn't happen. If they didn't have a team, you didn't have a team.
Yeah.
Now they give every kid an opportunity to play.
And I think that's good. You want people playing sports when they're young. I mean, it does get them to that avenue of where they're doing something else besides all this social media, besides all the phones, besides all the other things. And there's a great value in teamwork. There's a great value in adjusting to problems on an athletic field. There's a great value to that gets lost. I mean, it's not easy. And, you hear the old adage, you have to pick yourself up. Well, that's probably more so in life than it is in sports, but we don't realize it,
Well, I thought as a young fella in high school playing football, it taught an awful lot of good life lessons. I mean, hard work and getting along with people, discipline, authority, coaches. I mean, you've got to things that you can carry into life.
In football, to me, and I'm talking high school, Division III, I'm not talking the NFL, is the one sport where you can make yourself better. I mean, for instance, I couldn't hit a curveball, so my baseball career was done. Okay, I couldn't hit a jump shot, so those skills were not part of me. But I could get in a weight room and lift weights and take up wrestling so they could make me better, have better feet, and then play line in football. And you don't need to be in a, political, money-oriented AAU team, travel league, or anything like that. You just can go work hard and make yourself a football player. I'm not saying you're going to be the quarterback, and I'm not saying you're going to play Division I, but it is still one of those sports where if you're determined and you say, I want to play football, they'll find a spot for you in high school and Division III.
Yeah, well, it worked for me. I had to work hard. I mean, natural skills weren't my forte. I had to get out there and bust.
Yeah, and that's still the nature of it. It's still that type of sport.
Yeah, and part of what I enjoyed about it, plus the fact that it is, I think, an ultimate team game too. Because I mean, if you don't do your job,
yeah,
chances are plays will not succeed.
Yeah,
you miss your block or you miss an assignment, and the high the skilled guys in the backfield, they can get creamed.
It's funny. It's still. I heard one of the announcers say this last week that Notre Dame and Ohio State are the number 1 and 2 ranked, and I didn't look this up, number 1 and 2 ranked defenses in the country. And I just read that Notre Dame leads all of football in takeaways. So here you boil back all this stuff, and here it boils back to defense and turnovers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I guess knowing where you being in the right spot at the right time. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to the championship game. Now that's coming up on Monday, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you got the inauguration. We've got Martin Luther King Day. And we'll have a college championship game.
I didn't look and see if my daughter's got a basketball game. I won't be watching it. I'll be watching the basketball game.
Well, that's parenthood. You do
Yeah.
what you got to do. And well, that's kind of neat in that she's gravitated to basketball. Does she prefer to watch the guys or the gals?
No, she likes the gals. She watches the guys, but she likes the women's basketball. She really likes college. She likes going to coach. We've been to College to a game. We've watched Eastern because Pat Knowles used to coach with me. His daughter Julia plays for Eastern, Connecticut. But we've gone to a lot of Coast Guard games. She really likes watching Coast Guard and identifying with some of those young people, almost like maybe you did years ago when Otto Graham was coaching and they had Coast Guard football here. That's in a sense what she does. I mean, I'd have to say she's a big fan of Paige Beckers, as probably every girl in the state is. But she's also a big fan of Coast Guard basketball, women's basketball. So
no, it's nice that they've got a nice squad too.
Yeah.
Interesting you bring up Graham because as a youth, I mean, when he was living in New London. If he was out and about, he was always good to the kids. I mean, he was pleasant, and it wasn't like he was a big shot and kind of blow you off. He would take time to say hello, and he was pleasant, which I remember. And I always thought highly of that. That he recognized, I think, his presence in the community.
I think I got the Coast Guard job. I know I did. I think they told me we're going to hire you. I think you told me on April 5th of 1999. And I called Otto, and Pat Knowles got me Otto Graham's number. I said, well, I got to call Otto Graham. I mean, I just got the head job at the Coast Guard Academy. And he was in Florida, retired, and his wife, well, I'll get him. And he said, got to the phone, he said, I'm only going to say 3 words to you. He goes, throw the ball. So that was my first conversation with Otto Graham.
Yeah, well, he used to have a big golf tournament over at Connecticut for fundraising for cancer. I mean, he had he had I forget what type, but he had a cancer, and folks came out. They wanted to rub elbows with the great Otto Graham.
Yeah. Listen, trust me, I coached there 21 years. They never let me forget it.
Well, he brought a lot. He brought a lot of positive notoriety to the academy. I mean,
Unbelievable. It brought national attention, and even to this day, I can go somewhere and people don't identify me as the football coach of the academy, or even Coach Grant, who's the head coach now. But they do. You'll say, oh, as soon as you say you were the head coach at the academy, they'll say, oh, Otto Graham was there. So he's the legacy of the academy. Part of the tradition.
Being able to get him, and he did a stint with the Redskins. He was at the academy, went to the Redskins. I forget for how. It wasn't too long.
2 years, I think, maybe. Yeah.
And then he came back, and I don't recall if he coached or if he just came back as the athletic director.
I think he did. I know he came back as athletic director, but I also do think he coached a year or two. I think I'm not 100% sure. I think he did, because I think he did in the 70s when he came back.
And he had a team that went to a bowl game, I think, in the early 60s.
63, the 1963 team went to the Tangerine Bowl, I believe. Yes, the Tangerine Bowl against Western Kentucky. Yeah. And I actually, one day, one of my players came in. He said, Coach, I just found this at a local bookstore. We brought in the program from that game. The 63 team was strong. I think the 51 team was undefeated as well. I think so. They had some early teams in the early years that were good. Again, the games were close and defensive struggles. And if you look at any of the championship years at Coast Guard, whether they were Otto Graham's or the 51 team or teams that I coached, or even some of the games now with Coach Graham, you have to win close games at the Coast Guard Academy. You do not beat people up. You can't run up. You just don't. You don't have the power and the thing. So all of their championship teams, if you look at, the games are won, many games, by a point or two. And that's the way it is at Coast Guard.
Well, one thing is, it's discernible to me as a fan, is that the size of the linemen that you're competing against. It may be D3, but these linemen at the squads that you're playing against, they're some big boys.
Yeah, there's a lot of big people. Yeah, and you go through years where you might have 5 big linemen and then 5 guys that are really tough that are the backups, and you say, well, we got 5 tough kids if any of the guys go down. But no, there is a big difference, and it's changed a little bit. They've had a little bit of leeway, but there was some times when I was there early on, I hate to say it, but they had to do body fat tests once a month, and so I'd have guys that didn't eat for a couple of days for that month period. But they've gone more modern with that. They've taken a more modern thinking approach lately.
I think all the academies have.
Yeah.
I mean, the linemen, at least in season, are allowed to beef up to a certain point, but they've also got to take it off when the season's over.
Yeah, I know Coast Guard, you have to meet the regulations for body fat by graduation, at least when I was there. I believe that at West Point, I don't go on record on saying this, but I think you've gotten like a year and a half after you graduate to meet them. So it's what I had. But at Coast Guard, when I was there, and I think it's still the same, it probably is still the same, you have to meet the requirements upon graduation. So, but our guys never bulked up that much that they got that heavy. You know what I mean? That they couldn't peel it off. I had numerous linemen that played at 240 pounds, and all of a sudden they were in flight school in June after they graduated. They met those requirements. So it really wasn't that kind of a burden, to lose that much to get down, because we weren't that big to begin with.
Yeah. Well, it does make it challenging to be competitive, especially in the league that you're playing in. I mean, years ago, I think scheduling was a lot different. Now you've got your league teams every year. You know you're going to play them, and I don't know how you schedule your non-conference games and how far out that you do schedule them.
Well,
and do you do that, or does the coach or the
usually
AD do
well,
that?
usually the athletic department did it, but you had a lot of leeway when I was there, and they still do. But it's a very cooperative thing. But again, I'll circle back to say you have to put it all in perspective. You know, we're not going to set a low bar. We're going to set the same bar as everybody else. We want to win. We're going to do everything we can to win. But you have to keep in the back of your mind that you also have this other goal of you know, really using the sport itself, the challenges of the sport, to make people better officers, to teach them leadership. I mean, near the end there, I was letting some of the linemen who were highly intelligent to run some of the meetings. You know, they have an officer there now coaching, Hudson Dunaway, who played for me in 18. His last game was when we beat Merchant Marine down there in 18, and I think he was one of the smartest players I ever coached at anywhere. I'd let him run some of the offensive line meetings. You know, I mean, he was that sharp. And so you learn how to use all aspects of the game to teach leadership and to keep that in mind. You know,
Is that much respect for a peer to operate at that level? Is it kind of a player coach, so to speak?
Well, I wouldn't say. I think that's built into the academy, because you have this whole system of leadership where you go freshman or fourth class, third class, second class, first class. So the whole leadership thing is already built in. So that's being done already outside of football. I think we kind of did a little of that with football in my later years. But that's already done at the academy. They're already doing that leadership thing through everything else, so that a first class is almost like an officer, you know. So that's already built in and ingrained in the system of the academy. Kids at the academy are so smart that they pick things up. I mean, we were sliding some protection. We had 2 years where we didn't give up a sack, you know, or I shouldn't say that, where we gave up fewer sacks in the nation per any NFL team per throw, NFL Division I or Division II or III team. And we were shifting our protection. Our linemen were so smart they could slide the protection the opposite way based on where the safeties were lined up, based on where based on our linemen looking out at the defense and saying, okay, we're on the left hash. This is where the defense is. They're going to blitz from this side, and we were letting them shift the protection. And you know, that's like NFL level stuff in terms of spending amount of time on film. And we didn't have to do that much with it. Our guys were that sharp. So that gives you the ability of a young man to be a leader on the field.
Did you find during your coaching tenure that you would lose players that, for what, I mean, maybe the military wasn't for them, or did you find that those who came in to play ball, that was an asset?
I think, you know, one of the things, I think I put a line in the book there where it says at any other college, football practice is the hardest part of the day, but at the 5 national service academies, it's the easiest. That's how tough the place is. So we wanted to make it fun, and we wanted to give them that 2-hour window of college football. It isn't college football day and night. It's only college football for those 2 hours. But you're always going to have people who struggle with the academic level of a place like a military academy. You're always going to have people who struggle with the military rules. You're always going to have people that struggle just from being away from home. So those challenges are always there. And you know, it's hard to play football at a National Service Academy. It's hard. We were just talking. It's hard to play women's basketball at a National Service Academy. It's hard to be on a wrestling team. You know, I had Thanksgiving dinner with Chase Randall, the wrestling who won the national championship last year at Coast Guard, the first NCAA wrestler. It's hard to do those things at a National Service Academy. So of course you have people who, you know, struggle in many areas and say, well, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to make it here. So it takes a special person to play sports at these National Service Academies.
But part of entry into the academies, I mean, there's not necessarily a varsity athletic component, but there's a physical component.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't be a couch potato and
No,
come to the academy.
And I maybe I should correct myself and say you have to be a very special person to go to these academies. And if you choose to play sports, it's more of a time challenge, that's all. So they're all under a lot of pressure academically and, as you just said, physical fitness wise. By the way, my 21 years there, that was my faculty duty. I was in charge of anyone who failed the physical fitness exam and had to be put on probation and, within danger of being disenrolled. And we had a high retention record because they're self-motivated kids and they get themselves out of the mess they're in and work out. But that's part of it too. You have to be physically fit. Yeah.
Now, do you like the at all levels of college athletics how these conferences and leagues are evolving and kind of got super leagues now?
Yeah, well,
that natural rivalry between Southern Cal and Rutgers.
Well, again, I probably more so than the average American watch much less NFL football on Sunday in the first half of the year. Very little. We do with other things. I do buy season tickets to Coast Guard and come home from the games and flip on, and all of a sudden, in September 10th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon after the Coast Guard game, I'm watching Oregon and Ohio State. So getting back to your point, I do enjoy that. I mean, suddenly and maybe that is, suddenly I'm watching a lot of college football early in the year. So, and on Saturday, my daughter played soccer this fall, but if she didn't have a game and we were at the Coast Guard for a game and I'd come home, or if Coast Guard was away and her game was over or whatever, I kind of enjoy those super leagues. I can't say, I'm just talking about me, a retired guy who's got a couple hours to watch football. It's enjoyable. I'm not saying it's good for the sport or not. I don't know that. But
now, you had retired before name, image, and likeness kicked in. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Any observations or thoughts on how that's functioning? Is it working or not?
Well, I'm not sure what it does in Division III. I mean, my wife says I'd be eating hot dogs for a commercial if they let me do it, but I'm not sure how it affects Division III or how it affects the Coast Guard Academy. I mean, it's a good question for me to ask Coach Grant next time I see him. I'm not sure how it does.
Well, the academies can't accept.
Yeah, you're right. I think they probably have a different set of rules. They probably can't.
They can't accept money.
Yeah, you're right.
So, I mean, I don't know if that has any impact in terms of recruiting. Where do you go to Amherst or do you come to Coast Guard? Where Amherst, maybe you can get free pizza for the year.
In my opinion, I don't see how that would affect Division III. And this is me talking to I was talking to my brother about today, talking to my daughter who's 14. Listen, why don't you go to school, get good grades? I said to her today, I says, you know how many days I worked for a living? And she said, well, your whole life. No, I didn't work. I coached football. I got a paycheck from when I decided I was going to get into it full time and had the opportunities. So I kind of say to her what I would say to any Division III person. Find a school you like. Find a school that fits you academically, that fits you what you want to do with your life. If you have the opportunity to play sports, wonderful. I don't see how it could affect name, image, likeness in Division III. But again, I'm far removed. I'm shocked at what some of the Division I players are getting. So I could be removed from that statement.
Well, I gather that you mentioned Ohio State, that their players are in mass, they've got like $20 million. I've read that. That's a lot of dough.
I don't know if you know. I was a graduate assistant football coach for 2 years at Ohio State, and back then there was 8 full-time coaches and 4 graduate assistants, and that's it. Now they have these staffs of 50 people and analysts and everything. I'm like, I was running around like a loony, cutting film up, doing this, carting videos. You know what I mean? Doing all the things you did with 4 GAs and 8 coaches. And now, a kid couldn't get a free piece of pie. I mean, you couldn't. I remember I was in charge of summer camp. I had to go pick up 20 or 30 pizzas for the recruits because they could give them pizza during the camp you know. And I remember once somebody said to me, make sure none of those players grab a pizza. I mean, the player couldn't even grab a free slice of pizza, you know. And I'm like, so now I don't know how that works. Pay the people like that. I just don't know. I don't understand it. But above my pay grade, I guess.
Well, it's something. I mean, you know, across the street over at Con, I mean, they've got a nationally recognized soccer program. You know, they won a national championship, I believe, within the last 2 or 3 years at the G3 level.
Yeah.
You know, and that's happening in a vacuum in London. I don't think it gets any traction. That's one thing I wish that the locals would show more interest in Coast Guard and Con and Mitchell in their athletic programs. I think that, we've got all this great competition going on here, and we're missing the boat as a community.
Well, that's again, I'm not an expert on that area. There is a lot of very, very talented college competition in this area. You know, exciting to watch and see at all levels of all sports and all venues. So you can see a lot of good sports around here. Spring, winter, and fall.
Yeah. So I mean, I just wonder how to get the locals a little bit more aware of what's going on. That's one reason why I try to get some of the college coaches to come on this program, and I've had a good success at the 3 colleges as well as over at Avery Point.
Well, you know, it goes to what you said a little bit earlier about these super conferences. There's so much sports on TV. There's so much sports all over the place. I mean, even UConn struggles to fill their stadium. Am I right or wrong? I mean, I watched a couple
of football. Yeah, the place holds 40. They're lucky to get 20.
Yeah, I mean, I watched a couple of the games on TV. They wonderful team this year, tremendous football team, but their stadium's half full at best, and so they're even, so there's just a lot of competition.
I'm curious to see how they do next year. In that, they had a nice team. They finished with 9 or 10-3.
Yeah, they had a heck of a team.
But they had a tough start and low expectations. I think that may have fueled some of the empty seats because people just weren't believing the wins and expecting that they'd come up short, and they kept winning. You got to give more a lot of credit.
You got to give him a lot of credit because even a couple of the games he lost were to good teams, and he lost by like 1 score. So I was very, very impressed with UConn this year. Very impressed. And I think, again, I'm a retired coach, but I think Coach Morrow will probably have the same type thing year in, year out. You couple every once in a while. You have a year where you maybe have some injuries and that hurts you or something like that. But I mean, I think he's running. I think it's an excellent. It's a lot of fun to watch on TV if you catch the games.
Yeah.
Again, I haven't went off. But
when they first started at the D1 level, I was a season ticket holder up at Rensselaer for up through the year that Michigan played here, and I cut loose after that. And at the time, I was expecting UConn's program to kind of take the path that Rutgers had when they went big time back in the mid '70s, and Rutgers struggled mightily for years. I think until Greg Schiano came in. I mean, they were really kind of chum for an awful lot of schools. And UConn also, I think, suffers from not being in a conference.
Really?
It's hard to get a schedule and getting people excited for schools that you're not familiar with. It's not like you.
Well, just from a fan's observation, 5 years ago you would have said they're struggling, just like you said, because they're not in a conference. And now multiply that 5 years later, they're not in one of these super conferences. So I think that's it in a nutshell. These super football companies who again, get all this money and generate all this money. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, the NCAA gets all the basketball money, but the football money the colleges keep.
Well, I'm not sure how that works.
So,
but,
there's a lot of, and again, it probably hurts. I'd love to see them get in the ACC or the Big Ten or something like that. I think that, and I'm sure they would too.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they want to for basketball, but for football, it would be, advantageous for them.
You know, I went up to twice this year to UMass to see. I saw them play Missouri. At the time, going into the week before, they were, I think, 10th or 11th in the country, and then they lost just before UMass, and they dropped to 19. But they came in to watch a legitimate top 20 team, and you know, UMass is kind of in UConn's position in football. They're not in the conference. They're going into, I think, the MAC conference next year, but they've been unaffiliated now for a number of years.
All right,
And they have had problems with scheduling and getting players and that kind of stuff. And then I went up the last game of the year and saw UConn play up there at the McGurk Stadium.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, I'll circle back and say these super conferences are so powerful now. I mean, just the amount of TV money and how they get teams in the playoffs, and that's where college football has gone to.
That's how I think Indiana did it this year. They brought the new coach in, and he brought in basically a brand new team with the name, image, likeness in the portal.
And you mentioned to me before we were on the air about West Point playing and how they had to change another opponent for their bowl game because the team they were playing, their coach left and took the whole team with him to his other school. So it's a different kind of world now, right? I don't know if it'll collapse or if it's a house of cards or if it'll go on forever.
I think as long as the money works, it will continue.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many teams that play bowl games now. I mean, every team at the D1 level that I guess is 500 or better, you know, it gets a bowl.
Yeah.
So you know, you've got the taco chip bowl and the you know, the sliced onion bowl or whatever it might be. And when you watch on TV, you know, there's very few fans there. I mean, you know, it's friends and family, it looks like. But you know, the TV money must be there. There's got to be sponsors, or they wouldn't do it.
The USA Today released the assistant coaches' salaries. I mean, I think there's 10 or 12, and again, I know there's a bunch, but there's like 10 or 12 guys that are making $2 million a year to be assistant coaches. I mean, that's
at colleges.
At colleges. Yeah. I mean, and you're talking, you know, Ohio State and those schools are paying, you know, $1.5 to $2 million for some of their assistant coaches for courses. It's insane. So I don't know why you could tell a person not to enter the transfer portal and choose to go to another school and have his freedoms when his coach is making $2 million, the assistant coach, the head coach is making $10 million. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Well, it's interesting, and we'll be there to cheer the teams on and enjoy the competition. Yeah. And hopefully I'll see you at a Coast Guard game next fall, or maybe at a basketball game this winter.
Yeah, we'll be down to some basketball games, but I buy my season tickets. Actually, I think they made it public. Coast Guard and Merchant Marine are playing in Fenway Park next year for their end of the season rivalry game.
That's terrific.
Yeah, so I know that that's what they're playing.
That'll be fun for the.
I think it's like right around Veterans Day, one of those that Saturday there.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I hate to say this, but we've exhausted our time here,
right.
And I've been getting my cues, and it's time to say we have to button up. But I want to thank you for carving out an hour and shooting the breeze.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's been a lot of fun, and we'll have you back when your next book is published. Let me know, and I'll be.
Can't wait. I can't wait. So I appreciate it.
Looking forward to that, and hopefully we'll see you up at the academy at a ball game and get a chance to meet the rest of your family. Folks, you've been watching City Focus, and we've been having kind of a free form program tonight. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next week on City Focus. Good night.